Okay, so we were talking about the atmosphere and we have these pollutants in the air. Carbon monoxide, if you've ever been in the cities, in a big city where you get kind of stuck in a traffic jam for a while and you kind of get a headache, it's probably from that. I mean, carbon monoxide, in your garage, if you sit there too long, you're going to die. But you can actually get carbon monoxide poisoning, not to the point where you're going to die, but you'll get a headache when you're in a lot of traffic. Okay, hydrocarbons, sulfur dioxide, nitrous dioxide, all of those things come basically from your car exhaust. Okay, the table lists pollutant gases that are present in a typical urban environment. Okay, and it assumes that there's no major smog problems in the city. You're going to end up with more issues when you talk about smog, with, like, if you have no wind or if you're in a valley. There's been a lot of issues like on East Coast cities that have smog problems. It's not really an issue in North Dakota. But although the typical value of the sulfur dioxide is low, it is probably one of the most hazardous. If you ever want to read a really good story about the London fog, if you guys have seen The Crown, you'll see it in there where they talk about that fog. It was from burning coal, and it wasn't just fog. It had a lot of sulfur dioxide in it, and there was a lot of people, they say over, a couple thousand that died of breathing it in. So even though it's a low amount, it's not very good for you, okay? So one of the things that happens, and you can see, not so much in our area, okay, but over in the East Coast, they burn a different kind of coal, plus they have different soil, okay? Well, remember with our pHs, we've got the low numbers in here. Over, like I said, over here in the West, pretty much from the Mississippi West, there's not an issue with the acid rain. And let me see if I've got, when you take and you burn coal or oil, one of the byproducts is SO2. Okay, if you take SO2 and you add it to water, you get H2SO4. And that, my friend, is sulfuric acid. Okay, now it's not this super nasty acid that's like going to burn through your skin or eat your umbrella or whatever. But what it does is things that are out in it all the time, like here you can see a statue, which this one isn't too bad, actually. It hasn't been too crumbly, but if you've ever been to Europe, you'll see a lot of statues where they've crumbled. If you've seen pictures of the Colosseum, the big place where they used to have the gladiator things, it's about a third of what it used to be because it's crumbled because of acid rain. There's forests that have disappeared, lakes, you think about the fish, they're living in acid, it's not going to be good for them. So, whenever you get this byproduct of sulfuric acid, and again, it lowers the pH down, in the 4.3 range. Okay, it's not like 1. We talked about acids and bases before, but over in the West, what happens is we don't burn as much coal. Most of our coal comes from this area right here, but we have a lot of buffers in our soils that absorb the acids. So we don't really have the issues, but these guys, not so much. Okay, their soil is very acidic. They have different vegetation and they got all kinds of issues with their lakes and stuff because of the acid getting in there. So what's going to happen is, again, you have water vapor in the air and it takes this SO2 and makes sulfurous acid, and if it's SO3, it makes sulfuric acid. And you put that, and now you've got acid instead of your normal rainwater, which should be around 6. You're getting 5s and 4s and even, down in almost to the 3s. Okay, the primary thing that's responsible for acid rain is nitrous oxides and sulfur. Sulfur is the one that really makes the acid rain, but nitrous oxides can do it as well. Those would come from your car exhaust. Okay, so again, it's not a huge deal in our area. In the whole West, it really isn't. But the East, they have a lot of problems. And if you've ever gone to Europe, you can see a lot of damage because of acid rain. So they've got much more issues because their soil doesn't have the buffers. See, I can talk about that because we already talked about buffers, right? Okay, if you have very, very acidic rainfall, you're going to get corrosions to buildings. The plant life is going to die. And again, anything that has to live in the water is not going to do well, right? Because you're living in acid. So acid rain is one of the environmental issues that we have to deal with. There was a issue for a while that Canada wasn't very happy with us because we were sending our pollutants up there for them to deal with, because that's an issue too. The pollutants don't stop at the border. So, you're sending pollutants up here, why are you doing that? Stop it. And they're like, it's your problem, not ours. So if you got some issues that occur because of that. Okay, some of the things they can do to prevent these emissions of sulfur is the real big one. They'll even check coal, and if it has too much sulfur in it, they won't burn it because it's going to be an issue with that. But they can put powdered limestone in their calcium carbonate. They'll add it to the furnace in a power plant, and it'll convert it to calcium oxide, and then it'll absorb the SO2. They have things called scrubbers. I think that's next. Okay, so gases can be passed through a suspension of calcium oxide that they have. Here's a power plant with the same result, where you get, powdered limestone. It goes in here, it reacts with it, and then that'll just settle out, and then they'll remove it. Okay, they precipitate it into what they call a slurry. If you ever want to see it, they have it, and Minot, they have it. Their water treatment plant actually produces the slurry as well. The thing about it is you can actually use it in lakes that are very acidic to lower the pH. It's kind of like adding Tums. Okay, so this is one thing. Now, a lot of the coal plants in North Dakota haven't upgraded to this stuff, and that's why they're closing. We have 4 in North Dakota, and I think they're all supposed to be closed within the next few years, which has led to some economic issues. Okay, nitrous oxides and smog. There's photochemical smog. Okay, that's the brownish gas that hangs over large cities. And really what it is mostly is NO2, nitrogen dioxide. Not good. They used to have, it's in the 70s, and again, I'm old and I remember these things. They used to have air quality indexes for big cities like New York and in Los Angeles and stuff. Oh, California had lots of issues with it. They really dealt with it. That's why you notice, if you know anything about cars, we have the California emission standards. Those are the highest standards where they test the emissions from your car. And if your car can't pass them, you can't sell it. You can't drive it if they're in certain areas or whatever. They decided to clean up their air. And so by doing that, they cleaned up their exhaust from their gases, and that was one of them. So this is New York City. They used to have days, and you can see, like if you look at pictures in China and stuff, where people actually before we had to wear masks because of COVID, where they would wear gas masks all the time because it was so nasty outside. If you breathe that in, you're going to have issues. Okay, this is called photochemical smog, and it happens. You take the pollutants from your car exhaust and you take sunlight. You have to have sunlight, and it converts it into photochemical smog. It's not just fog. Okay, it's more than that, and it's got pollutants in it, and it's hard to see. And if you don't have air movement, it hangs around. Okay, it's a form of oxidation of nitric acid, or nitric oxide, I guess. And it's the big thing it comes from is car exhaust. Some of these have been eliminated by our catalytic converters, which made people unhappy, because to use a catalytic converter in your car, you can't use leaded gas. People like leaded gas because lead is actually slippery. It serves as a lubricant. But lead is also pollutant in the environment too. So that was one of the things they started moving. I think by the early 80s, then you couldn't get a leaded gas anymore. Okay, that was a big issue. But again, that was, if you had put leaded gas in your car and you had a catalytic converter, it would destroy it, and they're really expensive to fix. So, people didn't want to do that. Okay, so the nitrogen oxides, they're components of photochemical smog. So you need nitrous oxides and you need sunlight to get smog. Okay, and again, it's not just fog. Okay, there's pollutants in there, not stuff you want to breathe. Bad for your eyes, bad for your lungs. It's just not stuff. And maybe, what I'll do is I'll put in a story about, I want you guys to read about the smog that occurred in London. That was probably the worst case. We've had some issues a few times in the United States. There was one in Philadelphia or in Pennsylvania called the Donora. It was a town that was kind of in a valley, and they got, bad fog. They thought fog, but it was smog, and caused some issues. And actually, I think that was one of the things they warned them about in London, because they burnt so much coal, and that they were going to have issues because of it, and they kind of blew it off, and yeah, it was bad. So I think that'll be after this, I'll have you watch something about that, read something about it, and tell me some things. What we got next? Okay, ozone, carbon monoxide, hydrocarbons, they also contribute to air pollution. And again, the biggest thing with air pollution, you're going to have severe respiratory problems. Okay, It's going to, it's going to bother your eyes. It's going to bother your nose. Any opening, basically. And if you already have breathing problems like asthma and things like that, you're going to have issues with smog. And again, smog is made usually in the morning. It's not too bad, but it gets worse as the day goes on because you usually need sunlight for smog. Okay. There's some certain conditions that have to occur for it to happen. But again, this is the way New York City used to look a lot of days in the 70s until they started cleaning it up, getting rid of some of those nitrous oxides. Again, catalytic converters. The factories had to burn cleaner. The coal, actually, we don't use nearly as much coal as we used to because it's really a dirty way to get energy. It puts a lot of pollutants in the air. So they've done things like that to help eliminate some of this. Okay. What do we got next? Do we got water? Okay. So when we're looking at our earth, okay, we have what we call a thermal balance. So much energy from the sun comes in, heat, and we keep some of it, obviously, because we don't want to freeze, but some of it goes back out. And you guys have probably heard of this, the greenhouse gas effect. What happens is we have gases up there now because of burning, because we burn so many fossil fuels, we have extra carbon dioxide. Normal carbon dioxide isn't an issue. We make it, we breathe it in, we breathe it out. It's not a pollutant in that sense. But what it does is it like blankets the earth, and it doesn't allow heat to escape like it should. Some has to go back. And so that's why, you'll hear global warming, the greenhouse gas effects, and all that. Greenhouse gases are carbon dioxide, methane, things like that. And they actually absorb heat and keep it in. And so the earth is getting warmer. And I'm pretty sure you guys have heard of all this. The greenhouse gas effect, you can see, again, because of carbon dioxide, water vapors, methane. And again, it's much higher now than it ever used to be. Some people will tell you, oh, it's not really a thing. It's just cyclic. And it has. It's been up and down and up and down and up and down. But right now, our greenhouse gases, like they used to be, up, down, up, down. Now they're way, way up, way off the chart. And that's because we're adding too much CO2 into it. And you'll hear a lot about our carbon footprints and all that. That is something we have to reduce. Otherwise, and some people are like, well, why is it, below zero all the time in North Dakota if we have green, if the earth is getting warmer? The weird thing about the greenhouse effect is it causes extremes in weather. Instead of, the whole earth getting warmer, some areas get really hot and some get really cold. Okay. We're melting. Like if you ever really want to see the effects of greenhouse gases, you need to go to Alaska. Poor Alaska. They're such a delicate environment already. They have permafrost where part of the soil never thaws. Well, it used to be just a few days a year where that soil would defrost, which, they got used to. They built things on it. And now there's very few days that they have permafrost because it's gotten warmer. And so their buildings are crumbling. The Alaskan pipeline, which was a huge deal, part of it has fallen down and they've had to repair it because what they thought was this frozen ground that never thawed, now it thaws. And so you got all these things bending and breaking. They have a lot of issues with fires. And I'm sure you've seen the lovely pictures of the polar bears. The polar bears. What happens is the polar bear swim out a little ways to look for food. And then when they get tired, they jump on an iceberg and, kind of ride it in, rest or whatever, and then finish the back to land. There's no icebergs out there because the ice is melting. So the polar bears are actually drowning. Okay. I've talked to some people that live up in Barrow, Alaska. If you know where that is, it's way, way, way up there. It's actually more north than the North Pole. And there's a lot of polar bears up there. And they found a lot of polar bears, dead polar bears, like on the shores and stuff because of things like that. So there's all kinds of issues because of greenhouse gases and the greenhouse effect. And I'm sure you guys have heard a lot about it. We have our Earth Day celebrations and all that where they really talk about that. And I could go on and on and on and on and on. The thing to remember about greenhouse gases is if we don't reduce our CO2 emissions, we're going to have more extremes in the weather like we do now. We have more tornadoes, we have more hurricanes, we have more floods, we have a lot of things going on. And again, it's because we're messing with the weather. And that's the greenhouse gas effect. Okay, so we'll talk more about that later. I think we're done for today.